evening. This is Animal Uncontrol. Welcome to the voice chat. Topics under consideration, new members, keyboard commandos, AI abuse, and potpourri. Now, starting off, we have a new member, animal abuse in Hungary. Is there a handle by which I can call you? Do you have JB maybe, or what can I call you?
Hello, everybody. I'm not quite sure what the JB is, but just you can just call me Joe if you like.
Okay. So. Joe works. You can call me Bill. That's what my mom calls me.
All right.
Usually after a bunch of curse words and all that, but okay.
We already have something in common, yeah.
Yeah. I've been following your work. You do a fantastic job. I love your videos. And anybody listening, I'm speaking to animal abuse in Hungary. I will indicate or post a link to his YouTube channel, and he has a lot of really good things to say about the topic. So now that you're on, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what interests you in the space? Like, why are you taking an interest in the dog apocalypse?
Well, I'll just try to keep it short. Now, first of all, thanks for the invitation, of course.
Sure.
It's a pleasure to be here. And well, I mean, what is there to say about myself? I mean, I'm just a regular bloke. You know, I'm just, I mean, I was born in Hungary originally. I'm a bit older than 40 years.
Okay.
But my parents and so my family left Hungary when I was 3 years old. So back then it was still communist. Was still in communist times, and we escaped to Switzerland actually. So I grew up in Switzerland, and yeah, I lived there for like basically almost like 30 years, and then I moved around a bit. I mean, I lived almost 15 years in Austria, and also a few years in Dublin, actually in Ireland.
Oh wow.
And 2 years ago, I actually moved to Hungary, yeah, really for the first time in my life, because my parents live here again. So after they got retired, they moved back to Hungary from Switzerland. And I thought, well, why not give it a try? You know, I always wanted to learn a bit more about the country and, you know, to see what life is like here. And yeah, so this is the way I can actually segue into the dog problem.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, the dog, you know, the dog problem was one of the very unexpected problems that just came up. And this problem has become so bad that I actually have to leave the country again. So
really?
It's just absolutely, I mean, for me, it's just absolutely unbearable.
Wow.
And this, I'm really not quite sure what happened here, or if I don't think it was always like that. Like, you know, when talking to my parents, and so they also say that this has just become worse. But it really is like I live in a city that has almost 20,000 inhabitants, and like you can go anywhere in the city and you will just hear dog barking everywhere.
Yeah.
It's funny that sometimes I actually go to church, you know, because that's the only place where you usually have no dogs. But I went to church today actually, and I couldn't stay there for 5 minutes because outside there was a group of dog keepers just and they had just a fight. Their dogs had a fight, and it was just, yeah, you just couldn't sit there and enjoy 5 minutes of quiet in church even. Yeah, so that's how life is here. And yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty I'd say I'm pretty sensitive to noise.
Yep.
But the dog noise, there's something about the barking that just drives me absolutely nuts.
Oh, sure, you and everybody else. I mean,
And
dog
yeah,
barking is, I mean, it's an alarm and it's an inbred behavior. You know,
exactly.
it's intentional. And what it does is, yeah, it initiates a fight or flight response in the
Exactly.
listener. And but the thing is, they're all false alarms, but you're just constantly getting these false alarms, and it's really bad for your body. And some of us, like yourself and myself, were conscious of this.
Yeah.
And many people aren't. They say, well, it doesn't really bother me so much, but it does. It seriously does damage to your body. I was actually just looking at another site today. Maybe I can bring that up on a share. So even your church going experience has been, you know, disrupted by mutts.
Oh, absolutely. It's that's really yeah, I find that really insane. And as you said, you know that some people don't seem to be so sensitive about it. I really, it's an absolute mystery to me. It's totally puzzling that how people here can live like that, because you just, I mean, the owners, I mean, I just can't imagine how they cannot not be totally wrecked by this noise. But I mean, you have to be a complete vegetable here
Oh, you do.
to.
They do.
But
Yeah.
I've talked to quite a number of them, and I don't know. I'm really suspecting that they just have some parts of their brains missing or
Well,
something.
they do, and I
Like,
think, well, many people lie about it. It does bother them, but they won't admit to it because they've been conditioned to, you know, love dogs unconditionally, or they think that
yeah,
everyone else has, and they're not going to speak out against the mutt matrix. But it was interesting, and I don't know if you've listened to all the voice chats, but I don't know if I've raised this at least once because my mutt crazed neighbors across the street, who are now long gone, thankfully. But
hmm
I used to bring up because that dog was unbelievable. I mean, you could walk 300 meters away and hear him loud and clear, and he would
yeah,
carry
yeah.
for hours a day. But what was interesting about them was that I don't know, they do recycling in your country, but at the time they did here they would hand out these bins. They were, you know, I don't know, I guess 10 gallons or maybe like 40, 50 liter, you know, plastic bins, and you would put
hmm
your aluminum and glass and so forth. Every week they would put out about 4 of these bins that would just be overflowing with beer cans and wine bottles. And
Yeah, shocker.
it was just the 2 of them too. Like they didn't have
Yeah.
a parties or anything. And if it was funny, again, I don't know how it's sold in your country. That's why the international stuff is so interesting. But here, like they call about it like top shelf or bottom shelf. Like the really cheap shit
Oh, yeah, yeah.
is on the bottom shelf, like these gallon jugs that's, you know,
Yeah.
$7 or $8 a gallon. It would just be overflowing with this stuff. So yeah, they were just completely shit faced all the time. That's why it didn't bother them. You know, but the
Yeah.
problem is not everybody else is. So, but
Yeah.
it affects them. I mean, sound is a real thing. It's real as a bullet. And it affects everybody, whether they, you know, realize it or will admit to it or not. And the thing is, and a lot of people are in this space. If you get into this is why I'm loving this conversation. If you look at like why do people dislike dogs, dog owners, dog culture? 80% of them are in the space because of dog noise pollution. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and it doesn't get enough airtime because a lot of people seem focused on the dog attacks, and not to minimize that, but yeah, the dog noise pollution is a big problem. It doesn't get enough attention. And really the fact that it's allowed to continue is criminal, because if anything else were doing this, it would be banned everywhere, or
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
would be contemplated completely differently. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I thought the same, you know, that we wouldn't accept that from, I mean, first of all, from any other animal. I mean,
No,
we
we
wouldn't
wouldn't.
accept that. And this was actually a discussion that I had with one of my neighbors, and he was just totally puzzled. And I just saw that he didn't get the point. I told him that, look, I have not installed, you know, a huge sound system in my garden that is just blurring out music all day long and all night long, you know.
Yep.
And he just looked at me and as if I just spoke another language. And although, like, the analogy is the exact same, you know, it's the exact same in consideration that, you know, if I put up, you know, my heavy metal music for everybody in a 500-meter radius to hear all day long and all night long, but they just don't see the connection, you know. They just go on and say, yeah, but you know, I mean, the dogs, they have to bark, you know, that's their job. You know, that's the only argument you hear.
They need to leave then, you know, because that's what, you know, a lot of the, you know, anti-pit bull people say about pit bulls. You know, if their, you know, inclination is to tear kids to shreds, and they can't be around kids. And if their, you know, inclination is to noise pollute, then they can't be here, because that's what they'll say. And I don't know, I mean, often what they'll say is, well, you know, dogs bark, it's what they do. And it's like, well, then, but you brought the dog here. Like, you know, they're accountable for the noise pollution. They're not smart enough to, you know, connect the dots, I guess, or they just won't, you know, they just won't. And I guess, and part of it is too, is that the worst thing about it, I mean, the noise itself is bad enough, but it's the unpredictable nature of it, because you don't know when the dog is going to start, or how long he's going to carry on when he does. And that is what makes it torture. Yeah. Because it's torture, because noise is used as a torture method.
Oh, yeah.
Literally. And that's what it is. These people, they're allowed to torture others and get away with it. And it's totally outrageous. It's totally outrageous. And the hypocrisy of these people knows no bounds, because you're right. If you were to put a couple of refrigerator-sized speakers in your yard and, I don't know, blast AC/DC at 2 in the morning, they'd be on the phone with the cops in 5 seconds.
Absolutely.
Right, guaranteed. But they're like, oh, but the noise we make, you know, it's like, yeah, it's perfectly fine. And the worst, well, another bad thing about it is the dog noise pollution serves no purpose.
Mm-hmm.
None.
Yeah, there's none. Yeah,
there's absolutely no purpose. I mean, you know, I've you know, and I've had these kind of conversations in the past. I've said, look, you know, I'm willing to put up with some pollution, because it is kind of a price you have to pay to live in a society, and that includes noise pollution, like from vehicles or airplanes or whatever. But the thing is that those sources of noise pollution, there's a couple of key differences. One, they're arguably useful, right?
Yeah.
And they're also limited in duration. Like if I live, because I have a rail near here, a heavy rail, and the sound doesn't bother me. You know, it's a Florida East Coast heavy rail. So a freight train goes by, and it's not, because it's like maybe 3/4 of a kilometer away. So I don't really hear it. It's just like a rumble.
Yeah.
But that's a key component of our economy.
Yeah.
So you know, it's like, okay, so it's useful. It runs on a schedule. It's not that big a deal. It's a big difference between some yard barker going arp, 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 arp all day for no reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's no, and it's a point always, that there's no upside to it. No. None. It doesn't do anything for anybody.
No. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's, you know, that's one thing. And I actually, I mean, I haven't really looked into that, but also, you know, what you mentioned, the example with the train, or, you know, it can be any other traffic. Like, I also think that, like, our brain, you know, just caused by evolution, the reaction that we actually have to the dog barking is just a different reaction than we have to
Yep.
the traffic, because it, as you said, you know, it puts us in kind of this fight or flight mode.
Yep.
Because I think that really comes from you know, from our like 100,000 years history, that 100,000 years ago, you know, it was the wolf barking, and that is still in us, you know, that
Yep.
this goes to a different part of our brain and causes a different reaction. Now I myself here, in front of my bedroom here, there's a street, and you know, it's not a busy street, but you know, in the morning and the evening, you know, when people go to work or come from work, there's quite a bit of traffic, and I don't mind at all, you know, like the cars are like 4 meters in front of my window. I don't even hear that. Like, I don't mind at all, like even if there's a lot of traffic. But with the dog barking, you know, as you said, the problem is that even if they are not barking, you are still so nervous because you expect it any second to
Yep.
start.
Yep.
You know, and then when it starts, then you just think, oh God, now it's starting again. And you never know, like, how long is it going to last? Now,
Yep.
again, you said that it could be for half an hour, or it could just be for 5 seconds. But you are already, when it just takes 5 seconds, you're already, you can really feel how your guts are just kind of
Yeah. Well, that's the
like
thing is, I mean,
the
that's how.
poison inside, you know.
Yeah, it's a suspense and the tension, and that's
Yeah.
how horror movies work. Like a really effective horror movie works on suspense and tension, not the actual action itself. So yeah, you're always waiting. It's like, well, when is the next, barkathon going to start? So
Yeah.
you go to bed at night and you're thinking, well, am I going to sleep through the night or not? Maybe. It depends on whether the dog owner in proximity allows you to, which gets
Yeah.
into the other point that I always make is this is an extremely serious civil rights issue, because dog people are allowed to trample the rights of others with impunity, and the government lets them get away with this. I mean, this is like full blown oppression, not just, the noise pollution, the dog attacks, the other problems presented by dogs in society. It's, like I said, it's an extremely serious political problem. It's a social issue. It's a civil rights crisis that they're allowed to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And now the thing is that I mean, you are in the United States, and I was actually pretty impressed when I looked at your channel about the legal expertise that you have, and the other members have, and all the kind of the high level legal discussions that you have. And I mean, I was just looking at that, and I was thinking, oh my God, like we are still like light years away from that, in Eastern Europe. Like, there is nothing happening here, just absolutely nothing.
Here's the thing, though. It's that, well, first of all, I always say, it's one of my disclaimers is that, I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. But with that said, well, thanks for the compliment. Yeah, I like to think of myself. I know a lot about the applicable laws, and not just laws, but public policy, because, law and policy aren't the same thing. Like the law is what's written in black letter, but the policy is what you actually, or what the authorities actually do, right? And but the thing is, and that's a complete dumpster fire here. I mean, people are knowledgeable about it, and there's applicable laws, and and people cite the laws and hide behind the laws and avoid the laws. It's a complete mess. And I think and a lot of it is that, I mean, my other narrative is that, dog people are above the law.
Yeah,
they're above
absolutely.
it, and it doesn't really matter what the law says. I mean, they'll hide behind the law when it helps them. But then when it doesn't, they're like, well, that doesn't matter. That doesn't affect us. Like we're above that, You know, I mean,
Yeah.
the laws are for like you peasants, not for us elite dog people, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing point I make too, is what we have is it's a political problem, but it doesn't fit neatly on anywhere on the political spectrum. And it really, I guess, a political spectrum here in the United States may differ from other places. In other words, what constitutes conservative or liberal or left or right may vary from place to place. It's a bit subjective, but I made the point, it was a few voice chats ago, I made the point that what you have is, here at least, maybe not necessarily where you are, but I think in a lot of places, it's an anarcho-tyranny arrangement.
That sounds
okay. And now anarcho-tyranny, I don't know if you listened to that, because it was the alien drone guy and I were on, and you'd love this guy. He's a really smart guy, and he's very deep thinker, philosophical. And I just blew him away with that. He's like, I've never heard of that. But actually, if you look it up, it's not a formally recognized political paradigm, but it's sort of a dystopian arrangement where, you know, one group of people have anarchy where they can just do whatever they want with no consequences, right? Mm-hmm. But everybody else, it has tyranny. They're oppressed. They're restricted. And actually, that was going to segue into another one of, you know, tonight's topics, because the way it works here is that, yeah, dog owners can completely screw you over, but if you retaliate, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And ironically, you know, what I find ironic about this, and I've been writing about this because last decade I started blogging about this in 2012. Mm-hmm. And that was a thing, if you get into me, you know, I started blogging about this, and in 2017 I got out of it because you burn out on this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then it was about a year or so ago I got back into the space for, you know, a few different reasons, but that's what you have, is you have a, you know, one group of people, which are dog owners. And this is a dog problem. It's not an animal problem. It has nothing to do really with like rabbits or cats or horses or other animals that people like, because, you know, those things are already restricted.
Yeah.
They're very restricted, at least here. You know, I mean, I don't know what the laws are like where you are, but, you know, and it's what's interesting talking to people in other places. But, you know, here, all these other animals are very restricted. Like if you're a dog person, you can own not only can you own any dog you want, mm-hmm. you can do anything you want with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you can take a place, dogs are banned, take them there anyway. You know, you want to, like, you know, murder your neighbor, go ahead. As long as you use a dog, it's okay. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's literally, it's legalized murder. Yeah. It is, you know, it's legalized, but if you take action against,
I mean, we're laughing, we're laughing, but if you think about it, it really is, yeah.
But this is a big problem, and, you know, it's a huge social issue. It's a political problem. But yeah, I want to segue into, but what's ironic about it, and it's something I've been talking about and writing about for a while, is that what's happened is that the different factions of the dog cult have been turning on each other. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you picked up on that, particularly here, like with the service dog people, you see that. And also, you know, the pit bull people, because I was going to bring it up today, but I don't know if I really want to get into it today. But, you know, here in the United States, and other countries too, there's always a constant political battle over the legality or restrictions involving pit bulls and other, you know, fighting dogs. Mm-hmm. And it just rages. Bring it here in Florida. It's like an ongoing. It's a bigger political issue than guns or abortion. Maybe really? Even more than both put together. It's a big issue. Wow. Because Yeah, people trying to get pit bulls restricted, folks trying to get them, those restrictions lifted. It's a massive political battle over this stuff, which is ironic because it's like, well, can you have a pet tiger? No. Okay. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Although technically it's like we got into this too. I mean, if you want a pet tiger here, it's possible in theory, but there's a whole slew of legal and administrative hoops you got to jump through. Nobody does it. There's probably 5 people that have a pet tiger in the whole state, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, yeah, it's a huge political issue. But you think why is it such a problem? Like, why can't we get any restrictions here? And I believe really it's because dogs are literally a sacred animal in our society. And I mean that straight up. I can share, we had one of our favorite trolls was on the I Hate Dogs channel was making some posts, but many of them believe that, they're supernatural creatures. So
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's that's a conclusion I've come to as well. That I mean, here, I don't know if I mean, when you tell these things, then it seems to be something universal, more or less. So I don't think this is specifically Hungarian, but yeah, I mean, as you say, they are really an absolutely sacred animal.
Yep.
And that's the same thing here. Now, we don't really have this pit bull conversation here at all. Like, I don't really know why, but I think that's just because we are like 20 years behind. I mean, that's
yeah.
the
You'll
only reason.
get caught up. Believe me,
I mean,
you'll have pit bulls everywhere in no time. I used to joke, it's like I got to walk across all the pit bulls to get to my mail. I mean, they're everywhere, Yeah, so you'll get caught up. Don't worry about it. Like, there'll be pit bulls everywhere in no time.
Yeah, I really don't.
But what's the kind of thing too is people talk about people from different countries and even different regions of different countries. But I always try to tell folks, like, don't be too provincial or reverse provincial, because as bad as you might think it is where you are, it's kind of like that everywhere to some degree.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not.
True.
It seems like
humans.
It's kind of like COVID. It's endemic, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Your case rate might vary, but it it varies even in the United States. One thing was interesting was because I lurk in many of these dog-free Reddits. Like, there's a dog-free Reddit. There's a banned pit bulls Reddit, and a few others that I lurk in and comment in sometimes. And it seems like the hot spot for dog problems in the United States seems to be in Denver. Because I see all these posts from people who come from other U.S., like from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and they moved to Denver and they say, yeah, it was bad where I was, but it's way worse here. So maybe it's like, Denver is the Mecca for, like, U.S. dog worshippers. Maybe.
All right. Well, good to know.
Yeah, a good place to stay away from. Actually, I've been to Colorado. I mean, it's a beautiful state. It really is. I mean, because I do a lot of it, out, hiking and so forth. It's a beautiful state, but yeah, I guess you probably just want to stay out of Denver. It was interesting because Denver just, I believe they just repealed their pit bull ban. Some folks may, quote me on that, but that was always and it's always a big political battle here, is that you have, interestingly, about half the U.S. states have what you call preemption laws. And what that means is that you can't pass dog breed specific laws. Now, other
Oh, right.
animals aren't protected. Like I'll give you a really good example. I just learned this the other day. Well, I'd known that like New York State is a preemption state. So if you're the mayor of Albany and you want to ban pit bulls or chihuahuas or whatever dog breed you don't like, you can't do it because
All
of the
right.
preemption laws, right? But New York or New York City actually had banned Bengal cats. A Bengal is a
Right.
wild cat, house cat hybrid, but they're small. They're like 10 pounds, right? But I guess what happened was some clown in New York City had a pet tiger, so they said, "All right, we're banning all the exotic cats, even the
Oh,
small ones." And it was like
all right.
very a peep from anyone. But you want to ban pit bulls in New York, you get burned at the stake.
All right. Yeah,
Because
that's weird.
yeah, because pit bulls are dogs. Pit bulls
Yeah,
are dogs, and and dogs are sacred. I mean, I say that. I mean it literally. They're sacred animals in our society. So,
yeah. That's yeah. It's interesting how different the situations actually are, because as I said, we like this pit bull discussion is not going on here at all. But I've actually seen pit bulls here. So for quite a long time, I actually thought they were banned, but I wasn't even able to find any reliable information on that. I mean, that is how opaque the the legal stuff here in Hungary is. It's as a private individual, it's basically impossible to actually find reliable information. Like
real.
even on laws, it's so you really need a specialist to look into the most mundane question, because like it's just absolutely, it's just a jungle, and you can't really rely on any information. And then for quite a long time I've never seen any of these bully breeds like pit bulls, but then suddenly I just started seeing them everywhere. And then I just noticed, okay, they are not banned because loads of people actually do have them. And it was in one of my videos that where I was whining about an encounter with a loose dog where the owner was nowhere to be seen. And one of these was actually a young pit bull, and that was one of the occasions where I actually pulled my knife out, because I just saw that thing. It was just roaming around in the street, in a busy street actually, and I saw it from around 30 or 40 meters away. And just the first movement that I made was to just pull my knife out immediately. But then it's, I mean, I'm talking about it in the video, so it then just disappeared through a hole in a fence. And but yeah, that was one of the occasions where I had to pull my knife out, because like yeah, I'm just not going to take any chances.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are apparently allowed here, and there's no discussion going on whatsoever.
Really.
That's people, but that's also I mean, a difference I actually noticed between the United States and many European countries, so not only Hungary, because I've been to the US a few times. And it's interesting that you guys, as I noticed, I mean, you are just very, very active. That is something that I really noticed, that you Americans, you're always doing stuff, and when you see something that you are uh, dissatisfied with, then you're trying to do something about it, and you get together, you form groups, and like here,
Yep. Yeah.
you have
Like
the Discord and everything. But here in Europe, like that's like, especially in Eastern Europe, that is not the mentality at all. People here love to complain, but they never take action. That's not at all in the mentality of people. Like they just complain, but nobody would ever have the idea to actually get up from his arse and start doing stuff. And I was also really surprised when I actually started this channel. I mean, I thought, there is so much conflict about this dog topic in Hungary, which is which is all of because of the barking. You know, it's
Yeah.
I would say 90% of it is because of the barking. And I thought there must be thousands of you know, YouTube channels and groups, and you probably have lawyers that are specialized into noise complaints and everything. And I looked into it and I couldn't find anybody. You know,
Yep.
there's just nobody. There's not even a YouTube channel going on about this in Hungarian, you know. And it's just because, you know, it's just a mentality thing. Like, people are just very passive and they just, yeah, you know, they complain, but nobody would ever, like, not even, you know, to make a YouTube channel about it, which is not, I mean, that's not exactly, you know, like very time consuming activism. I mean, like,
No,
most
yeah.
people have a YouTube channel. I mean, you could just put up some videos. It's not much work. And I was just really surprised that am I really the only one in a 10 million people country that has a YouTube channel about this? But apparently I am. I mean, apparently I am. I don't know.
Well,
And yeah, so yeah, so that's just one of the big differences, I think, between the US and between Eastern Europe in general, I think.
well, I think, you know, you're not, you might be one of the first people to speak out, and you talk about, you know, differences in, you know, time frame. When I got into the space, and it was first when I was in, you know, in the process of being barked out of my house back, this is like almost 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had other problems with dogs too, and continue to do so. And, you know, like, because you've commented on many of my videos, you followed the work, and I don't know if you've read the blog too, but, you know, last decade I blogged
Not yet.
a lot of this stuff. But you know, back when I got into the space, yeah, well, one thing I'd found out was you had people complaining about it, but nobody had applied any critical thinking to the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It had nobody. I mean, you had people who love dogs and people who hate dogs, but it was all kindergarten level reasoning. Right?
Yeah.
Like, the dog lovers, they even tell you to be like, Fido good. Everyone loved Fido, you know.
Yeah.
And then maybe you had a handful of dog haters. You'd have, you know, Facebook channels and some blogs and websites.
Mm-hmm.
And probably most of these were just troll channels. They weren't really people who had an interest in the issue. Because one thing I pointed out, and I actually wrote a blog about this, and I should vlog, you know, do a video about this too. I wrote it called "For Whom the Bell Trolls," because if you really wanted to, like, just piss a lot of people off, I mean, you just wanted to just, like, if you're a troll, you just want to enrage people, just go onto Facebook or blog or whatever and say something uncomplimentary about dogs, and you'll make heads. There'll be spontaneous combustion and heads exploding everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't really very, like you said, it wasn't useful or interesting. It was just like, yeah, Fido bad. Fido smells like, I hate Fido, you know, but it wasn't useful because, so when I got in, I said, okay, I'm going to approach this kind of like you have, you know, I'm going to approach this from a more kind of take it from a more intellectual level, a more philosophical level, but also sort of, you know, translate that into real world public policy, like what can be done about this. And the ironic thing was, you know, most of the complainers really weren't interested. You know, they're like, you know, Fido bad, you know, Fido smells, you know, Fido's ugly, you know, he farts, you know, it's like, that's, and I'm not going to debate those things. I mean, that's true. But, you know, I tend to think of things, and it's a problem today because even here, it seems like if you look at it at a very superficial level, it seems like there's a lot of activism, but really there isn't. I mean, there is and there isn't. You know, if you look at, I think it was it the last voice chat I did? I think Kidder and I were on. and actually the one monologue I did in the interim, we're talking about Dog Bite Prevention Week. You know, that's like an event here.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about
dog
it.
bite event. But you think that, you're like, oh, wow, you know, good, bravo, the Americans are doing a dog bite prevention week, but really it's not. Like, that's really not what it's about, because the whole thing has been hijacked by dog cult interests, right? Who are, they use that to like, okay, we're going to use this as a vehicle to sort of promote our ideology, like canine supremacy, victim blaming, mitigating concerns and things like that. That's really what it's about. And that's the problem. So it seems like there's a lot of activism, but it's all been hijacked by the adversary, so to speak. And you also see that again, also with the because you see again, there's this political war raging over pit bulls. And I've been talking about this since last decade also. And I've done some video blogs on, I think it was my Mutt Heads, I think it was 14, when I talked about, BSL. BSL is breed specific legislation fails. And part of the reason why there's no traction on that, why all these implementations are either, backed out, like they're repealed, or they're just an obvious fail, is that that has been hijacked by pro-dog interests also. Like, it's not, again, it's like dog bite prevention week. BSL is really not about mitigating dog attacks. Like, that's not really what it's about. It's about promoting dog interests. And that's what I realized too right away was because I started with the barking and I said, okay, what the whole noise pollution thing, and got into dog attacks. And I knew dog attacks are a big problem also. Because I've had problems. I mean, I've been bit. My brother's been bit. I've had dogs behave dangerous towards me like plenty of times. I really liked your video where you got into, I had an Australian friend tell me the term is waylaying, when you're walking down the street and you're basically being ambushed by dogs. They're charging the fence or running to the length of the chain, and they're, they're behaving really aggressively. And I mean, and that's a huge problem also, because you can't just simply exist in peace or safety anymore. But the thing is going back to the whole BSL thing, is that, that's been hijacked by pro-dog interest also, and with some nuance, because many of them actually say, yeah, pit bulls are a problem, but they endlessly promote that dogs are the most wonderful thing on earth, right? And that's the problem, is it's like it's being promoted by the wrong people. Most of the people pushing this supposedly should not be doing it, because a canine supremacist or a dog rightist is not the right person to be making a case for these breed restrictions. They're not, because, and that's one reason why it keeps failing. They need people like us, because I always would tell them that, because again, I'm a people first person, and I would say, look, the best arguments for BSL, for these pit bull restrictions, they never get used. Almost never. You almost never hear it, because there's two really good arguments that almost never get used. One is that those kind of restrictions are imposed all the time. Like, on animals all the time. And it goes back to, again, how they do things in Europe or other countries. I don't know enough about the system, but in the United States, everybody across the political spectrum respects the fact that, states and cities, like your lower jurisdictions, have broad powers in restricting the keeping of animals. Okay. Federal government, maybe not. That might be unconstitutional under the 10th Amendment, but I'm not a constitutional scholar, so whatever. But like, again, the state of Florida, in the county I live in, they restrict all kinds of animal keeping. Nobody has a problem with it. It's only an issue when it's a dog.
Yeah.
Right? Now, a lot of the people taking issue with that, but they're not making the argument the right way. My position is like, look, Fido is a dumb animal like the rest of them, and he can be, regulated the same way, like the large cats and the horses and the ducks and geese and the rest of them, right? But they never make that argument because they're dogs first people. They're, essentially dog worshipers. That's a heresy. Because if you say that, yeah, dog is a dumb animal, just like a cat or a horse, that's a heresy. That's a sin. They're like, no, dogs are special. Dogs are man's best friend. And the whole, you've heard it a bunch of times, a whole litany of canine supremacist narratives. But the thing is, they want to have it both ways. It's like, look, you can't have canine supremacy and dog rights on one hand, and ban pit bulls on the other. You can't do it, or it's at least really confusing to a lot of people. So that's the one argument that never gets used. The other one is simply that pit bull people, like every other dog person, refuses to be held accountable. Because, you get into things like social contracts and the like. If you're going to live in a society and have any freedom at all to do anything, you're at least tacitly agreeing to be held accountable. Right? Yeah. We have a right to bear arms here, but if you go shoot somebody and you don't have a really good reason for it, you're done. Yeah. You're wrecked, right? But with a dog, it's different. Your dog deletes the Girl Scouts selling cookies. It's like, it's either it's her fault or it's just something that happens. It's a completely different perspective. But going back to that it's like, you know what? If these people, we'll talk about pit bulls, but really any dog person, you know what? If they won't be held accountable, then they can't, then whatever that is, that activity needs to be banned. So if pit bull people or any dog person, really goes back to all dog people, if dog people refuse to be held accountable, then dogs can't be owned. Period.
Yeah. I mean, it's a common sense question, actually. But as you said, you apparently with dogs, you can just not use common sense.
No.
I mean, they're just sacred animals, and they're special and whatever. But it's still. I mean, to me, it's still puzzling. It's and I think it will probably remain puzzling because even if I did figure it out, I still have to move away anyway. So it's I'm not really sure if I actually want to figure it out. But this what you mentioned, that how it's handled, again, one of the big differences, of course, between the US and between Europe. Although I don't know, you probably have big differences from state to state in the US. I guess. Yeah. Okay. We have just massive differences, from country to country. And that Europe, you can sit in your car, you can drive for 2 hours and you are in a different country with a different language, different mentality, different culture, different everything. And, the funny thing is that I have, personally, I have this huge contrast between, Hungary and the place where I grew up is Switzerland. And Switzerland, I don't know if you have ever been to Switzerland.
Oh, I've been to Switzerland. Yeah, actually.
Have you? Really?
Yeah, well, I'm not married now, but I was married and back in the 90s, and we did our honeymoon. We went to Switzerland, Austria, and we spent a little time in Germany, but Zermatt. You've been to
Zermatt? Yeah.
Zermatt was freaking awesome. Yeah, we got a kick out of that. Yeah, it was funny because we couldn't actually drive there. I don't know if they still do that, but they don't allow cars in the town, so we had
it's still like that.
Park the rental car and take the train in. But yeah, that was That was really awesome. Yeah, and I always meant to get back there, I guess. And now I'm, digressing. But yeah, I mean, Europe was a blast. We went to, multiple places in Austria, but like Salzburg was totally awesome.
Yeah.
Went to a few. I went to, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but Gruyere, where they make the cheese.
Yeah. That was perfect.
That's
Gruyere,
a really cool town. And I always meant to go back, but the thing is that there's so many great things to do here. Like I say, I could go to Europe, but I could also go to Wyoming or Colorado. Most of my interest is like, I'm a very avid hiker and outdoors person. So, which I mean, maybe Zermatt, the hiking, we hiked to the top of the Matterhorn. Not the Matterhorn, the Matterhorn, which you can actually, the non-technical, it's a climb, but you don't need like ropes or crampons or any of that shit, right?
All right.
And that was it was kind of funny though. It was a very heavy fog day, so I didn't really get a view up there. But and maybe one of these days I'll remember which hotel we stayed at in Zermatt. But in any case, but I always say, well, I could go to, Colorado or Utah or Wyoming. Like I've never been to Yellowstone, and people are like, you've never been to Yellowstone? I'm like, no, I've never been to Yellowstone. And I've never been to Grand Teton. Actually, until a few years ago, 2019 Colorado. And people are, because I have, again, people know I'm very, avid hiker. I have a RV, probably where you are, they call them caravans, a tow behind camper, basically.
Yeah.
All over the country with it. But people say, you've never been to Colorado? But now I can say, yes, I've been to Colorado,
All right.
But, and anyway, you know what? And I totally took the conversation off the rails. So do you remember what we were talking about?
Yeah, no, I do. We're talking about Switzerland, and actually, I don't know if you actually noticed when you were in Switzerland that, Switzerland is extremely keen on order. They want everything clean. They want everything regulated. They, and the regulations, they are really enforced very, very heavily. And, everything is in order, and everything has to be in order. And if something is not in order, then, the Swiss get really, really nervous. And they just, they have to find somebody and they have to get it in order. And, they have the same, at least, with the dogs, they have the same mentality, like you can have probably any dog you want, but if your neighbor is actually, if you bother your neighbor with the barking, then you can really go to the authorities and the authorities will just rip your arse open, so it really is, the authorities, they are really doing their job, and not because they have something against dogs. It's just the way they are, they are really maintaining order. Like they're almost, sometimes they really exaggerate even, that they're very, very pedantic. And sometimes they mingle, or how should I say, they kind of meddle in your private life, just because they want order to be maintained, and sometimes they go a bit too far. But at least, with the dogs, that you can go to the authorities and something will be done, something will be done.
That's good. I mean, the thing is, like in a lot of places, though, like I was talking about the anarcho-tyranny, is that they're very strict about everything except that.
Okay, yeah.
You got to watch out for that, definitely. They're very strict about everything. And they're not really that strict here, but a lot of times, if you call police about something, like if somebody, they're playing loud music or whatever, they'll come out, or fireworks, they'll come out. And often, the first time they will say, but if the barky dog, like, forget it, they got better things to do.
Exactly.
It depends on who you call exactly, like, they might come out and cite them, but getting anything done about involving a dog problem is very, very difficult. whatever the problem, there's barking, dog at large, dog attacks, you know, illegal dog breeds, whatever it is. It's like they go out of their way to do nothing. You know, I often think that like the animal control authorities, it depends on whose jurisdiction it is, because we have animal control authorities who are basically doggy social workers. You know, their priority is the best interest of dogs. That's what they care about. So they're right, but they'll be like right on the spot. Like if something happens, and this is a point I often make and why people got to be careful, because you think, okay, you reported all these dog problems and nothing's done. But if something happens to the dog, all of a sudden there's cops everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You know, they're investigating. You know, you've seen that. I don't know if you've really been on the Discord much, but you know, they'll be like, say, you have a neighborhood with a dog at large problem, and they'll do nothing. But then one of them gets poisoned, and all of a sudden the police are everywhere trying to find out what happened.
Oh, God.
So they're strict, but they're not. But that's what goes back to, like I said, it's a doggy double standard. There's a lot of protection, at least here. There's a lot of protection for the thing, but very little from it.
Yeah.
And you got to watch out for that. So just because you're in, I'm not, you know, dumping on the Swiss or anything, but just because you're in, you know, it sounds like you said they have a very strict law and order environment, but you got to watch out for it. Might be very strict for everything except that. Right.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
You know, it's definitely possible.
But
you know, another point I like to make too. I mean, it's not, dog people don't always get off the hook. There's, you know, a few places where they take this stuff seriously. Unfortunately, there's not many of those places, but
yeah. I mean, it's not here. That's, I mean, that's, although, I mean, I have to say, I mean, I was actually, I made a video about that because, you know, I actually did report somebody here because I ran into a, like, that was the other story with a loose dog, that I ran into a loose Rottweiler here one evening. And I made a whole video about that, but, you know, just in short, that, you know, that Rottweiler was, that belonged to, you know, to a garage that we have here, you know, like a place where they fix cars and stuff. And it is kind of the guard dog. And they have two Rottweilers. I mean, I've known them for quite a while now, and one of them just got loose, and I ran into that mutt when I was on my way to the shops, and that was the second occasion actually where I had to pull my knife out. But then, you know, the dog just walked back to the gate, and they opened the gate and let it in again. And I actually then after that I called that garage, and it was later in the evening and somebody was still there, and I called them, and they were just absolute arseholes about it on the phone, and they were just absolutely like sneering, snarky, and making fun of it. And they basically said, yeah, you know, it was just it was outside for a maximum of 5 minutes, so like, what are you complaining about? And that actually got me so aggravated that I thought, actually I was thinking about going to the police here. And 2 days later I actually did go to the police, and I made a video about that as well, where I just, you know, told the whole story, because I've never been to the police here. And I was actually positively surprised about how seriously they took it. And I mean, that was, but you know, as you said, that probably depends on you know, who you get to.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be lucky, you might be unlucky, and you just get to an officer who just doesn't give a shit, and who probably has a dog as well.
Yep.
And he will just think like, oh my God, another one of these Karens. But I mean, the guy that I got to, I mean, he took it extremely seriously, and they sent somebody out there immediately, and I think they really got onto it. So I was very surprised about that, but that might actually also be because the police here, I mean, I'm sure that they have to deal a lot with, dog incidents, and
Oh,
I think
sure.
they might actually be pretty pissed off by now as well.
Yeah,
And
well, the
but
thing is,
yeah,
yeah, that's true in a lot of places because dogs create well, as one of your videos, they create a ton of conflicts,
yeah,
between, and it's not just, they could even be secondary conflicts where, a dog attacks somebody and there's, it escalates, or there's a barky dog and it escalates, or, and so forth. And I think I read a statistic, it was from somewhere, I don't know if it's in the United States, take it with a grain of salt. It's something like 30% of police calls were dog related,
wow,
where
that's
the dog
insane.
was involved.
Yeah,
Which is, I mean, think about, that's a lot. And even you look at my area, I mean, where I live, and it goes back to, actually how they record crime statistics. But I live in, I'm knock on wood, but if you discount the dogs in a crime-free area,
mm-hmm.
I mean, totally. It's like literally a completely crime-free area if you discount the dog problems. But when you bring the dogs in, you have, assaults, escalating conflicts between people, and people going to the hospital,
Yeah,
police being called, and so forth. They just create, endless, conflicts between people. And yeah, it's a lot of, I wonder, and the interesting thing is, I'm wondering, like, when the police in your jurisdiction are called, what, I mean, they're like I say, be responding to laws being broken. I mean, are there laws involving dog at large, or dogs menacing people, or dog attacks, or anything like that? Like, what are they actually responding to? Like,
well,
what's the specific nature of the complaint?
I mean, the thing, when I went to the police here, well, I mean, what the guy said was definitely that the dogs at loose is, I mean, that's illegal. I mean, that's just clearly
Okay.
illegal. And so that was the main point that he was concerned about. And yeah, so the thing is that the laws are there.
Okay.
That's just here the same thing. The laws are there, but the problem is the enforcement.
Yep.
That you just have to enforce it, and you can have as many nice laws as you want. The laws are only as good as the people enforcing them.
Exactly. Yep.
And here, I mean, the guy that I got to, I mean, I'm still not even really sure if that was a police officer or if that was some kind of a lawyer or somebody who was actually working for the police. I mean, he was not wearing a uniform, but he was some kind of other
Might have been like
official.
a plainclothes detective, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah,
Here,
perhaps.
yeah.
And as soon as he heard that the dog was found outside of the premises, basically, I mean, he just immediately said, "Okay, let's go to my office, and we just have to, like, that is clearly illegal." And I told him that it was a
Oh, wow.
Rottweiler, and he said he immediately, I was absolutely blown away. I mean, he said, like, look, he told me that he's actually happy that I reported it because he said that that thing could just take somebody's face off, and then
Oh, yeah.
everybody would say, "Oh my God, it's a pity that nobody reported it." And I
Yep.
was just sitting there, and I thought, "My God, like this is exactly what I was hoping for, to find
Good.
such a
Good.
person."
I
Yeah,
mean, well, that's, maybe that's a good reason to stick around, because that's really encouraging, most of the time here, because actually it's funny because and it goes back to, one of the points I make, because one of the things that, I mean, I've had problems with dogs going way back, but it was
mm-hmm.
last summer, it was last July, we had an issue. There was a Rottweiler loose in the neighborhood. And I didn't belong to anybody I knew. So, I called animal control. It was on a Sunday, so they only had one agent, on duty.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really take it that seriously. They're like, well, could you catch him? I'm like,
Yeah, sure. I have nothing else
no
to do.
problem, you know. It's like, yeah, no problem. He's like, well, if you got a fenced-in yard, you could like try to like gate him in or whatever. But I'm not going here. Like, forget it, you know. Get your ass over here and impound him, you know. So
I thought that's their job, isn't it?
It was kind of coming. They couldn't send somebody for a couple hours, and this dog is sort of orbiting the neighborhood. And you know, I called animal control. I called him a couple of times, and it was interesting as I was in my side yard, and I'm calling him again. I'm on my phone, and where I live, I mean, I only have a 1/4 acre, but I butt up against a big natural area, so I have woods on two sides, on the north side and on the east side. So it kind of feels like I'm on the border of a forest, basically. So, and I'm on that side, and I'm calling him, and I said, two is like, look, this dog is still running at large. And he said, well, is he on your property now? And I said, well, maybe not right this minute. He's kind of orbiting the neighborhood. And I turn around, and he's right behind me.
Oh.
And he's not. He's detached. His head is kind of cocked to the side. His tongue's hanging out.
But hey, he just wanted to play.
He just wanted to play, right? And I'm like, you know, it was kind of like that scene in, you know, the Alien movie. You know, the captain is going through the air ducts. They're like, it's right behind you, you know. So I turn around, his damn dog is right behind me. I'm like, oh shit. He was like, right. I said, oh yeah, is he on my property? Oh yeah, he's really on my property.
He's right on top of me.
So what happened was, so they sent somebody out to try to catch him. They were unable to catch him. But what happened was another neighbor did catch him, and I saw him, and I know this guy. As I was heading out, and I saw him, he's trying to catch the dog, and I'm like, be careful, man. But anyway, he was able to, because apparently the dog wasn't, you know, dangerous. So what he did was he caught the dog, and he turned the dog over as a Rottweiler rescue. Because here we have, you know, this breed specific rescue. So a Rottweiler rescue came and took the dog away, and apparently, supposedly, it was reunited with its owner. But the thing is, you know, yeah, this is potentially a very dangerous situation. And you think about, you replace dog with any other animal, like if I said there's a bear running loose in the neighborhood, or a cougar or something, the whole reaction would have been different. You know, there would have been probably like police and, you know, SWAT helicopters and the whole 9 yards. You know, it's a dog. It's like, you know, it's just a cute little wiggle butt. It's a little, it's a wee little fur baby. Like, what are you worried about? You know, and Rottweilers are the #2 man killer, at least according to statistics. You know, they mess up a lot of people.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I was really lucky with that officer as well. But could have gone differently.
It was interesting. I didn't know if Kidder was going to join tonight, but he's been at war with, and he lives in the Minnesota, you know, the Minneapolis area. I believe he could. But, you know, he'd been at war with his, you know, mutt nut neighbor for a while. And, you know, all his initial complaints, they just ignored it. They're like, you know, it's not bothering anybody else. Like, who cares? Finally, somebody came out. It was some young cop who's like, yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to do my job because the law stipulated certain things. Okay. Like if the dog barks for more than 3 minutes, you write him up. Right? That's what it said, but none of these other quote enforcement people were willing to do it. And it's a big problem, you know, and that's why it goes back to, particularly if you go into the whole, you know, BSL debate, restricting dog breeds, is that really that has prerequisites. Like you need to, one of them being, you want to return to order. In other words, you need to be in a functional law and order environment for something like that to matter. Because if it doesn't, or if you're not, it's like, who cares? You can ban anything you want. But
Yeah, so I think exactly what you said now, that this functioning law and order environment. I mean, that's not really something that you would have in Hungary anyway. You know, it's I mean, not to be too negative, but I mean, I just really noticed that yeah, it's kind of people here also, they don't really have very much respect for the law. That's also something that I noticed. And that's also probably because of historical reasons. I mean, Hungary was a communist country for 40 years, and during the communist era, like the law was basically, I mean, the law was a joke anyway. I mean, everybody knew it, that the law was just there to on one hand, to terrorize the population, the
Yep.
normal people, and on the other hand, to protect, the party members, basically,
Yep.
the
Well, yeah,
members
it
of
was
the Communist Party.
anarcho. It was anarcho tyranny, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It
as you
was, or
said.
at
Yeah,
least it was a
exactly.
two-tier legal system. And Hungary was a Nazi client state for whatever 5, 6 years, right?
Yeah,
During World War.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the kind of thing too. Is yeah, that makes people, and justifiably so, very, skeptical about that kind of authority.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have, that's what we have now, though, is that the laws, at least in this space, are not, well, or they're not either written in a way or enforced in such a way to protect the people.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, in other words, it's the whole system. Like I say, the whole system is rigged in favor of dogs. It's
Mm-hmm.
corrupt. It's corrupt, and but that kind of thing. I mean, and that turns people against the system. Also, it makes them very cynical.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. No, that's yeah, and yeah, I really don't know that. Like here, it's just yeah, like people don't really respect the law very much, but usually, as you said before, they really like to complain when they think they are the victims. Then
yep.
they go on about, yeah, but the law says this and the law says that, and the others have to stick to it, but they never make the connection that yeah, of course others have to stick to the law, but so do you.
Exactly.
Like
Yep.
you have to stick to the law as well. You cannot just demand that from everybody else, but you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's really, people here just don't really make this connection. Like, and even, I mean, Hungary has been, like, officially, it has been a democracy for, yeah, like more than 30 years. I mean, since 89, which is more than 30 years now. Is it more than 30? Yeah, that's more than 30 years. But still the mentality has not really arrived in in democracy, basically. They're still kind of stuck in the 60s and 70s, that they think, yeah, the law is there, but that's just a theory, and then in practice we will just interpret it however we want, so to gain the most advantage for us personally. So, and
Yeah.
that's exactly the mentality that comes from the communist era, from the Nazi era, and also probably from the time before, when it was, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was an insane, legal bureaucracy, which was completely arbitrary, just depended on your status in society, what kind of rights you had.
Yep.
And that is very deeply rooted, it seems to me. But I mean, that's just kind of a pet theory of mine. But
No,
I'm not
no,
sure.
no. You're
Perhaps
absolutely
it's all nonsense. I have
right.
no idea what to.
Well, but the thing, like particularly with dog people, and they epitomize this, that they're like, well, the laws exist to protect me, but not to restrict me. In other
Yeah,
words,
exactly.
like, but
Yeah.
that's, and they'll do that kind of stuff too. It's like they'll literally sick their dog on people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, say, if somebody shoots their dog, they're on the phone with the cops. It's like they want the law to protect them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see that too. One of the things I've been going after heavily, and I've been collaborating with some of the other folks, like Chef and I, did a video together on, you know, the service dog dumpster fire we have here.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that, like, yeah, they want the laws to protect them, but they don't think that anybody should be protected from them. Right. Well, first of all, I mean, there's a big double standard there also, because they, you know, basically the federal government said you can just essentially just do whatever you want, because, and it's tough to get your head around, because they're literally able to self-qualify, but they don't want to adhere to any of the other laws. And they also don't respect the rights of, say, other dog people to do the same thing. Like, in other words, they'll say you get somebody takes their stink beast into McDonald's, right? And but you can't ask them. You can't say, well, do you have a permit for that, or any training docs? To say, no. I get the last word on whether, like, this is legit or not. I'm self-qualifying, right? But then they'll point to somebody else with their stink beast and say, oh, that dog's fake, kick them out.
Yeah. Yeah, well.
But don't you see, but the thing is, that person you're talking, they're trying to assert their entitlement status, not just against us, but even against other dog people.
Yeah.
Because you realize, like, look, that person is saying the same thing. They're saying, look, my Fido is a legit service dog because I say so. And I get to do that because that's what the law says. As long as I answer the two questions, and I can make up anything I want. Is it a service dog required because of a disability? Yes. What service is it been trained to perform? And the thing is, there's no limit there either. I could say, well, it's trained to lick its own ass. And that's it. And now they are now qualified to perform the activity. But, you know, what's happened is now it's turned into this big circular firing squad, because, you know, their fake service dogs are being attacked by other fake service dogs. And it's just this raging dumpster fire of fail, and everybody's pissed off about it. But the thing is that the quote, like, legit service dog people, they won't agree to any oversight. You say, hey, you know what? If we actually had a formal permitting system for this, maybe we could solve some of these problems. And if your dog's legit, it's like, look, just show your training docs to some governing authority. They issue you the permit, and you're good to go. And you don't have to worry about fake service dogs attacking your dog or all the extra scrutiny. You're outwardly qualified. You're good to go. Like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. The law says I don't have to. The law says I don't have to. It's like, well, you know what? When your service dog gets, like, mauled by a fake service pit bull, you got nobody to blame but yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, that's really that's something I've been observing a little bit, this service or fake service dog issue, because this is something that I've never heard of before, and this is not going on here yet. But I suspect, I mean, I'm not sure if it's ever going to be a topic in Hungary, but, you know, in Europe generally, like, it's funny that usually what happens in the United States will happen like around 5 years later than in Europe as well.
Yeah.
Or 5 to 10 years later. So I'm actually waiting for that. It's probably in Western Europe where that thing will start to come up as well.
Do you know, like, do you have any laws regarding service dogs? Like, in other words, like, if, for example, like, a restaurants or grocery stores are required by law, by law to accommodate service dogs. But as it goes into, it's like, are there health and safety laws that prohibit animals in these places, and are there service dog laws that allow people to essentially bypass those rules?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I haven't looked into it really, but I can tell you that, for instance, in Switzerland, I'm absolutely sure that they do have that. because they just have regulations for absolutely everything. But here in Hungary, I don't think so, actually. And the reason for that is probably also because here in Europe, you just don't see these service dogs at all. Like I've never seen a single service dog in Hungary, and I can't even remember when I saw any of them in Austria. Like, I mean, I perhaps I saw, like in Austria, I think like 3 years ago or so, I saw perhaps, like a blind person, with a dog.
Yeah.
But, even you don't even see blind people usually with dogs. Like,
well, very few of them do. I mean, the statistic here is that 98% of legit disabled people do not use a service dog. They use other means to, mitigate the disability, which makes sense because, and that was, one of the takeaways from not just the work that Chef has done, I've done, and the work we've done together, is it's a very crude way to solve or to address the problem. Right. It's like using, a horse and buggy to get around your suburban neighborhood. It's like you don't really need to do that. There's so many better ways of doing that don't involve a restricted animal. But as soon as you could bring up, you hardly ever see them. And that was true here also. Mm-hmm. But I guess it was probably middle of last decade. It just sort of exploded everywhere. You just started seeing them. And the problem was, the federal law protects them. But then the problem is that, and it's done with no consideration for, the rights or the interests of not just, the proprietors, the patrons, but even the local governments, right? Because you live in a city or a state that, prohibits animals in these type of establishments for all kinds of good reasons, health reasons, safety reasons, and so forth, right? But then, the feds came in and said, look, as long as a dog person says the magic words, they're good to go.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a big problem. If people talk about constitutionality, I mean, I'm not a constitutional lawyer or scholar, but I believe that's a constitutional breach because it infringes the rights of these lower jurisdictions to set their own rules. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you could say it's like, look, if you have a handicap, the dog is not the only way to mitigate the problem, right? I mean, particularly when you consider that, virtually all handicapped people don't use them. Because that's the thing, is because you see them all the time, but 98% of them are not legit handicapped people. They're just people abusing the law.
Yeah.
And that's it, because they're just walking their dog where it doesn't belong. And you can tell, because I've done, a lot of due diligence into, how like a legit service dog would act. And they're not acting that way. They're sniffing around, they're staring at people, they're barking, they're checking out the merchandise. But no, the service dog is supposed to be focused on the handler, because that's what it's there. It's there to do a job, and it's to assist its human charge, right? Not to, eyeball the bacon rack, right?
Yeah.
But but I didn't know if you had. I mean, many other countries like Australia, for example, has that, they have protections for service dogs, and so maybe some of our Australian friends could correct me, but they have protections for service dog people, but there is a formal permitting system. Maybe I got them mixed up. Maybe it's New Zealand. I got them mixed up. I don't know. People like to nitpick me, but whatever. But the thing is, that keeps most of the fakes out.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a really big problem that needs to be solved. And I tried to get a letter writing campaign to, solve the problem. And I approach it from the perspective of is like, this, infringes the interests of like legit disabled people. But the problem is that even your so-called legit service dog people, they're really dog people first. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
the foundation of the dog cult ideology is that you don't regulate dogs or dog owners at all,
Hmm.
right? Because those are for peasants, not for elite people like them, right?
Yeah. 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 Makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. So,
Yeah,
damn.
so I don't know. I'm pretty sure that if we give it another 5 to 10 years, then we'll probably have the same problem here in Europe.
Well, yeah,
And
I'm
it'll probably start
hoping.
in England first, that's or the UK. That's usually where it's when
Yeah,
it, when it goes over the pond,
where the
then
contagion
it usually
spreads. Well, a
starts
lot of it
there.
is
And
it's definitely the Western nations are definitely the nexus of the dog cult, even though you
yeah,
have it everywhere. But I think too is that if it collapses here, because it could go the other way. Like in other words, if it turns against them, if the dog cult like implodes here, that'll have sort of a domino effect. It'll spread out and affect these other places because
yeah,
no trend goes on forever, and the whole thing is totally artificial. The whole thing is propped up by ideology and government corruption, basically.
yeah,
It's not
absolutely.
organic.
Yeah.
It's not organic, definitely.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah, God, good
So
God.
you're thinking of moving, you're going to maybe move back to Switzerland. That's your interest.
Well, I think I'll move back to Austria actually.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean that's where I lived basically the last more than 10 years. And I mean there's still there are also loads of dogs there. I mean especially in Vienna. Vienna is surprisingly kind of a battlefield regarding the dogs, and
Wow.
has been a battlefield for decades regarding that topic. But I mean, I'm not going to Vienna. I'm going to probably a different place. But I mean, in Hungary, it really is like I mean, I've traveled around a lot in Hungary, and it really is the same everywhere. It doesn't really matter where you go.
Wow.
Like you have really like you can go to any street, and you have just around like 70% of all people just have at least one dog or even more
Wow.
in their yards, and they do exactly what you said before. What was that, whaling? That
Waylaying, well, like
yeah,
the ambushing. Yeah.
yeah, they just ambush you behind the gate, and yeah, just have fun going on a walk here. It's you just hope that all the fences will actually hold up,
Yeah.
because that's not always the case here. It's not everything spick and span. And you see loads of fences that are just held together by pieces of wire and I don't know, like duct tape and I don't know what. And if you have some 50-kilo Rottweiler behind that, then you think, okay, let's hope the duct tape is going to hold
Yep.
the fence together. Yeah, so yeah, it's you just can't relax here. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrible. Yeah, and I guess it's a regional thing. I mean, actually here it's not too bad. Actually, currently, and I'm knocking on wood, I don't have any dog problems in the immediate vicinity,
Mm-hmm.
which means at least the inside of the house is not noise polluted. But we do
Okay.
get, at-large dogs quite a bit. And you always worry, too, about being on edge, because even if the, dog nut neighbors move away, you never know when one is going to move back in, like
Yeah,
if the
exactly.
house
Of course.
changes hands,
Sure.
or if somebody like my next door, I'm kind of lucky. I have nobody behind me and I have nobody to the east, right? So I have a neighbor
Mm-hmm.
across the street, not even directly across the street, kind of across at an angle, kind of looking out. It's maybe at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And I have a neighbor on the other side. My next door neighbor, they don't have a dog or any pets that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know. It's like, that house could change hands, or they could, get a dog for cause that's the other thing. It's like everybody's pressured relentlessly. Oh yeah, because they have 2 small kids. Get a dog for your kids.
Yeah.
So you could cave to that, and then that becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So even with
Absolutely.
that, the only way you can escape it is I mean, for sure, is, you know, of a large property with, you know, a sufficient setback.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not that close to anybody, because even if you got 100 acres, if you're, you know, within 50 meters of your neighbor's property, they could still noise pollute you. And they'll do this. I have people on my blog, like, for example, they'll have, say you've got a house, you're looking from left to right, you got their house, you got a barn, and then there's your house, like on the right. They'll put the dogs on the barn, on the side of the barn by your house, so you get noise polluted instead of them.
Yeah.
They do that. They will do that.
The
right?
logical thing to do, right?
Yeah, because, well, then they don't have to listen to it. Because they, well, it's not bothering me. It's like, well, yeah, because you don't hear
exactly.
it, right? Or you're passed out drunk all the time or whatever. But yeah, you need a large property with sufficient setbacks. You know, some folks talk about having dog-free communities, but part of the problem here is, in the United States is that, you know, we've got, again, these service dog laws, because you can't discriminate. So somebody wants to move in with, well, I got, you know, 5 service Rottweilers that bark all the time and like this, you know, snack on neighborhood kids. It's like, well, you know, you got to let them in, right? That's the problem. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult problem to mitigate. It really is. You know, you don't get support from authorities in a lot of cases. It sounds like actually you did pretty good. I mean, maybe that, you know, cop you worked with that time, maybe you could, you know, get something going to deal with, you know, the barking and some, you know, some of the other problems. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but yeah. Yeah, oh my God, there would be so much to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we should have more of these sessions. We didn't really get into, oh, it's getting kind of late. I'll probably close the call out soon, but there's all kinds of things to talk about. Like often I'll go over news items. I probably won't today, but you know, we cover some of the you know, the outrage porn. You know? And it's interesting too, as you talk about, you mentioned you had that garage, that auto shop, repair shop near you that had the guard dogs. What's interesting about that is, I wonder if anybody's been injured on that property by those dogs.
Yeah, that's actually, that was actually a question that I asked myself, because I saw those dogs, you know, they were just running around there all day long, you know, and, you know, the customers, they usually, you know, they have this gate and they would just drive in and then leave their car and they would just be right next to the dogs. So, and I mean, these dogs are, I mean, they were really just massive.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't really understand how they would actually distinguish then between, you know, an intruder and just a normal customer.
Well, they can't. They can't.
Yeah.
They don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, they can't. They can't distinguish. You know, it goes back to, you know, a lot of these dog attacks are written off to, you know, like defense, like Fido was doing his job, like he was defending his territory. But that, you know, gets into, and actually you commented on the one video I put up about self-defense, and that's been, you know, an issue that I've been pounding on. And actually, you know, I'm a self-defense advocate, right? But the thing is that, you know, self-defense rights, there's a lot of nuance there, right? You know, you can't just say, well, that person might be a problem, so I'm just going to delete them. You can't do that. You know, and there's very specific laws involving these things. But the thing is, it's, again, it's a doggy double standard. The dog owner is given an exception, particularly if you get into, say, if you got a property with dogs on it. Even if somebody's trespassing, and there's always a lot of debate over this, but I submit it's like, look, using lethal force against somebody just for a simple trespass, like cutting across a yard or whatever, is not legal anywhere that I know of. I mean, usually there has to, and if it does happen, usually there's more to it. It's like, yeah, they were trespassing, but they were also trying to take somebody's head off with a chainsaw, right?
Yeah.
So that, but then something like that rises to the level of a justifiable use of force. But it seems to be that, you know, Fido's been granted unlimited self-defense rights.
Yeah.
Meaning that he could just attack anybody anywhere under the guise of self-defense. And what these dog owners are doing is they're booby trapping their properties, which, and it, like, people, I think it's what kind of got me back into the space, because there was a case where, you know, a trespasser was deleted by the dogs on site, and everybody's like, oh, Fido and Rover were like just doing their jobs. The whole thing is just written off. It's just fine, great, terrific, whatever. But you can't do that with any other means.
Yeah.
You can't, because, you know,
Yeah.
man trapping, and I've made this point many times, it's worth making. Man trapping is illegal as hell everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
With one exception, and you can do it with a dog.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, I brought that up, like, well, particularly even dog sitters that have been, you know, badly injured or killed by, you know, the customers' dogs. Like, there's a Jacqueline Duran case. She was horribly mauled. And, you know, if that had happened any other way, those dog owners would be on their, either in prison or on their way there.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but if they did it with, now, you know, she is suing them, but that's, you know, civil prosecution is another matter. It's just written off. It's like, yeah, it's just an accident. Either it was an accident or the victim deserved it. They screwed up somehow. But that's never applied to any other means. And that's really, talking about like a civil rights violation. It's like, what these people are allowed to get away with is criminal.
Yeah.
It's not so that they're criminals, but the fact that they're allowed to get away with it is criminal. It's terrible. All of it.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, I think I said it a few times, I think, in the videos, that I think it'll have to get much worse before it actually gets better. I mean, I think we are just at the beginning now of, you know, kind of, I'm sure it'll change, you know, at some point, but it'll get a lot worse first, because I think it's still, most people, you know, most people have not yet run into trouble with dogs. So, but you know, if the number of attacks is going to continue, you know, in that speed, then that will probably change pretty soon, but it will probably take a few years. And then, you know, people right now, they're just indifferent to it because they have not been attacked yet, or they have not
you know,
ran into
there's
trouble.
other problems involving dogs too. I mean, like the noise pollution. But I always like try to say, it's like, you know, being dog noise polluted is a special kind of hell that you don't appreciate until you've been subject to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it, you know, it changes. So what's your situation like? I mean, are you being noise polluted now, or how's that situation?
Well, I mean, right now it's quiet, but that's just because it's, you know, it's almost 4 a.m. So, I mean, right now I don't hear anything, but that might also be because I have the headphones on.
Yeah.
But I mean, usually, you know, during the night it dies down a little bit. So during the night, at least, you know, you can have, you know, 1 hour straight, you know, without barking. But
Jeez.
I mean, if you have 1 hour without barking straight, that's already a big achievement, you know.
Wow. And the noise actually, like, you can actually hear it inside your home.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like that's just, I mean, you would have to totally noise, you know, to insulate your house if you don't want to hear it. But, you know, even then, you know, like, I mean, you probably have the same situation in Florida. You know, you do spend probably a lot of time outside. And, you know, the thing here is the same, you know, like you have all these, the houses here, they all have a huge yard. and huge garden, and it's normal here, you know, it's a rural area, and we just have to spend a lot of time outside. And so even if your house is totally insulated, I mean, in summer we have like 40 degrees in the shade. I mean, that's, how much is that in Fahrenheit? That's like more than 100 Fahrenheit.
Wow, that's hot. Yeah.
And you know, you cannot just stay inside, you know, like in a bunker all the time. You just have to go outside. There's also a lot of work that you have to do outside in the garden, and so you are just subjected to it. There's no escape, you know. There's just no escape from it.
That's why I say, yeah, every square inch of the earth sounds like a dog kennel at feeding time.
Yeah,
it does. You know,
it does. Yeah, it does.
I guess, yeah, I do pretty well here because, again, I have, well, behind me there's like a green belt. It's maybe 100 meters, and then there's more homes on that side. There's actually a lot of barkers back there, but it's far enough away that it doesn't really bother me.
Okay.
And my next door neighbor doesn't have pets. My across the street neighbor actually has a dog, but he's a pretty quiet dog. You very rarely hear anything.
All right.
They're actually fair. I mean, they do some things, like they'll let them wander around, but you know, if every dog owner was like them, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, actually, it's funny because in a couple of houses over, they had pit bulls, and interestingly, I don't see that the pit bulls are gone. I see they did the pit bulls. They kind of cycle through. There's a lot of turnover, but they don't have dogs anymore either. It's interesting about the pit bull thing is a lot of dog people complain that pit bulls are like ruining dog ownership. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem. How?
Yeah.
Because it's funny because like those people, I don't know them very well, but so the pit bulls are gone, and now now they're cat people. They have these two orange cats, and they let the cats wander, but I don't care. Yeah, they don't noise pollute or behave dangerously. So it's like some people get into space like, what about cats? Like, what about them? Like, when was the last time a cat's like chased down a jogger and mauled him to death? It doesn't happen. And I admit, you know, but actually I like most animals, and I'm not even really like per se like anti-dog. Like I'm not. I mean, I don't like dogs, but I'm not like a per se dog hater. Probably more like you, because I'm more anti-dog culture. I'm like anti-dog people, because really they're the source of the problem. If nobody wanted these things, they wouldn't exist. You know, it's a consumer product. It's like having a microwave oven or a TV.
Yeah.
You know, people choose, and that's why I'm big on owner accountability, because whether it's for the barking or the dog attacks, they choose to bring these things into the community. And the problem is, but they refuse to be held accountable for any of the bad outcomes. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got interesting, like your rural area, but the funny thing too is, you know, a lot of times the countryside can be pretty noisy. You know, we have folks. I don't know if you talk to, you know, shout out to, you know, Dark Castle, and he has a YouTube channel also, and he gets jobs. He works as a park ranger and the like, but he's out west. He has a property in Arizona, and his nearest neighbor is about 400 meters away, and the neighbor has 15 dogs.
Oh, good God!
But yeah,
of course
he gets noise polluted, because part of the problem is that, well, merely because dogs are so loud. But in that landscape, and I've spent a lot of time out there, it's all open, like, because it's dense. So there's no like here. I live in subtropical jungle, so if you're 100 meters from the barker, but if you've got all this. You know, intervening, you got all these like trees and vines and all this heavy underbrush. It kind of soaks up the noise, but out there, the sound it just goes on forever.
Man!
But that's insane. Think about how loud that is. That the sound can carry like that.
Yeah.
Crazy. You know, why is something? You know, it's ironic too. It's like, I'm beating this to death, but in a lot of places, like here, like ducks geese, roosters are zoned out,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that, you would have to live in a rural or agricultural area to have them.
Uh-huh.
Why is because, well, the reason, well, they're too noisy.
Okay, yeah.
That it's like, gee, what other
Oh,
domestic
God.
animal makes lots of noise? What is
Yeah.
that? Is it guinea pigs? Is it gerbils? Um, what is it? I wonder.
Yeah, really. They just are sacred animals,
They
They're
are.
just,
Yeah, they have protections and nothing
like
else.
the cows in India.
Yeah. One thing we should do is, because you have a really good voice, we should do,
Ooh, thank you.
well, you do, but we should do um, a segment on, because back last decade on my blog, and I put it on a couple of videos, I wrote the 10 Commandments of Dog.
All right. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, it's what we could have is we could read them and discuss them, but
Yeah, sure. Oh,
what
that's
I'd
a good
done was
idea.
I'd come to, because at that point, this was maybe like 2016, I guess, but I'd been in the space for a while, and a lot of people, would call it. Even people I noticed in real life, they'll kind of lean in and they'll say, kind of in a conspiratory way, they'll say, dogs, it's like a religion for these people. And
Yeah.
it is, and so, but the funny thing was, this would come up on the blog a lot. I get lots of comments, and I put a blog post about, the doggy religion, and
Mm-hmm.
people, would insist, yeah, I mean, it's a religion, or it's very much like one. I'd say, well, yeah, kind of. I mean, it's not a formal religion like Catholicism or anything. Like, it doesn't have scriptures or the holy sites or sacred rites or anything like that. But it really does. I mean, it has well, first of all, many of them will say flat out that dogs are supernatural creatures. So
Yeah.
yes, they worship dogs. But I said, the way I am, it's like everything's, a snark or tongue in cheek. So I said, yeah, they don't have formal scriptures, right, or any kind of like official canon. So I said,
Yeah,
you know what,
not
I'm going to
yet.
do them. I'm going to do them a favor. I'll write them. I'll write it for them. So I wrote the 10 Commandments of Dog, and it's
Excellent.
yeah, it's a 10 Commandments of Dog. So now they got me to thank for it. But the funny thing is that, like, many of them would actually take stuff like that seriously. I mean, they would read it. They're like, oh, I don't believe that, but they do, because he actually, is based on how, well, what they say, how they act, what they do in real, in the real world. It's like, you can say is you can backfill in. If you take everything they say and do and distill it down, it all, reduces down to, one or more, perhaps, depending on what it is, of those ideals,
Mm-hmm.
because they're genuine ideologues.
Yeah. Now, yeah, 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 we should actually read that.
We
And
should.
yeah, we should. And actually, the jokes aside, actually that, I never actually thought about that, but you probably just gave me a good idea for another video. Like, actually, I think it might actually be some kind of a religion, a surrogate, because there is loads of discussions going on about why, for instance, why are people so polarized now in politics?
Yeah.
And like, politics has become kind of like a replacement for religion, because the kind of the classical traditional religions are more or less disappearing, and it seems that people do need some kind of a religion. Like, and
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
don't have the classical ones anymore, then they're just going to look for something else.
Yeah.
And that's actually an interesting idea, that I think that's very well possible, that these dog cultists, that this really is how they fill this void, in
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
this kind of spiritual voids that they have.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I might actually look into that. That's actually
Yeah.
an
Well, that's what
interesting idea.
I brought up was, I mean, there's a lot more to this than just like a love or an interest in an animal.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot more,
Absolutely.
and you're right too. It's like, yeah, people, I think I read somewhere something like 2 out of 3 people, say 65% or so, actually need a belief in something greater than themselves.
Yeah.
Which is, typically, what a traditional religion would fulfill that need. But that's what it seems, because you get a lot of people, they say, dogs are better than people.
Yeah.
Many of them believe that. They're smarter than people, they're more sentient than people, they're more ethical and moral than people. Because what could be higher than man?
Yeah.
God, right? And remember, dog is God spelled backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I brought that up the last time. I'd been hearing that for 12 or 15 years. Of course, you're in Europe and you speak multiple languages. But the thing is, dog is God spelled backwards only works in English, at least.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because I said too, it's like, let me try that in Spanish.
Yeah.
It's a common, it's like, the number 2 language here. I said, let's try it. It didn't. If you reverse the spelling, because it's like pero or para, depending on the masculine or feminine. Let me flip that around and see what it says. And it's just gibberish. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, sure.
And it's probably true in most common languages, or all of them. I don't know. I mean, is dog God spelled backwards in any other language? I don't know any. Yeah, not that I know of. So
except English. Yeah. So I mean, it's also, and even if it is, it doesn't prove anything. It's.
Well, yeah,
like, it could actually, that's just one thought that I would, look, if you say it's God spelled backwards, then it could also mean that, because it's spelled backwards, it is the opposite. Like the crucifix, if you actually turn it upside down, it's supposed to be a symbol for the Satanists.
Yeah.
So you could say the same. You could make the same argument for the word God. If you spell it backwards, then is it a symbol then for Satan? Or, I mean, it's just such a brain dead argument.
The thing is I've said too, I'm not a religious person. I'm not necessarily an unbeliever. I'm kind of an agnostic. But I'll tell you something. If it turns out that the devil himself is behind this dog thing, it would not surprise me one bit. Yeah. I'm not saying that it is, because there's something very, very wicked here. Yeah. Because it seems that you talk about dog attacks. Well, you brought this up because we were actually discussing your comments section, like the number of people who were killed as a result of dog attacks. Many of them are due to rabies vectors, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. You think about all the lives ruined, right? All the pain, the suffering, the anguish, the loss, not just the loss, but the economic losses. Just due to this thing. I mean, it's almost mind-blowing, and it seems like it's engineered to create as much pain and suffering as possible. Absolutely. Civil and social strife, political problems, corruption of our legal system. It seems like the whole thing is engineered somehow just to cause as much, like I said, as many pain and suffering as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And a religious person would definitely see something sinister going on.
Yeah,
here,
definitely.
behind or below the surface. I mean, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you talk about victim blaming, and the way they treat dog attack victims is just shameful. Yeah. It really is. I mean, it's an embarrassment. I mean, it's bad enough that those kind of things happen, but it just made so much worse by the reaction to it. It's just terrible. Yeah. It really is. I've been talking to Serena. She showed an interest in coming on tonight. I guess she couldn't make it. It's really difficult to get good times for people, but
sure.
She's reading that book, Death by Pitbull.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'll get her on, get a book report or a book review of that. But apparently most of what it's about is it's mostly victim stories, like parents who've lost kids to dog attack survivors, and what they're going through and things like this. It's tough to read. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's also difficult too because there's, again, going back, we're talking about with laws and law enforcement. In fact, there's no victim, or that's what I try to do, is try to be a victim's advocate for whatever it is. If you got barked out of your house or torn up by a dog or whatever, because there's, at least societally, there's no victim's advocacy here. There's no justice, none.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, well, you know what? Either you deserved what happened to you, or it's just the way the cookie crumbles, right?
Yeah.
It's either your fault or nobody's fault, and it's really it's just awful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's oh God, yeah. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it can't remain like that. So.
No, it can't. It's artificial. And the other, theory I had too is, one thing that, like I said, it's artificial, and one thing that promotes this is, or keeps it going, is just general prosperity. And I'm a big fan of general prosperity. I like prosperity. It's a good thing. But but that, sort of indirectly enables this, like, people, middle class having surplus wealth and so forth.
Oh,
but
yeah, absolutely.
what can happen is that, and we got a taste of this in the pandemic. And I guess too is, if you're from a communist country, and I've never lived in one, I'm just presupposing, but you're probably that person. I'm not saying, I guess your family left early, but you're used to scarcity. Right, you're used to going to the grocery store and there's the shelves are empty, and that's not something that Americans or most Westerners are used to. And people were here, the COVID pandemic really screwed up our productive economy. So people are going to the grocery stores and there's no bread, there's no toilet paper, and they're freaking out. They've never seen it before. And I'm thinking though that if if we have a big energy crisis or World War III breaks out or whatever, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to be the cure for this. But if that happens, then that is going to implode the dog cult, because people are going to have to really seriously reconsider their life choices.
Yeah.
Okay. They're going to have to really think about it, because, too, it's like, if you just barely have enough to eat, are you going to feed those 5 Rottweilers?
Yeah.
Or are they going to be dinner?
Yeah.
That's something to consider. And it's also not
that's
just
a good point.
That's that. And also, medicine, because a lot of people, and I'm sure people you hear about all the time, it's like, the healthcare in the United States, which actually, I think is pretty good, but it's, it's administratively, it's a mess. It's a cartel system. It's really expensive. And if you change jobs, you got to change doctors, which I had to do a couple of years ago, and blah, 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 blah. But still, people for the most part get what they need. Right, maybe it costs too much, or whatever. You got to jump through. You got to go through insurance company bureaucracy, because you think about, okay, there's about 1 million people a year here need antibiotics as a result of a dog bite.
Yeah.
What happens if we can't get those antibiotics?
Yeah, sure.
What do we do? Because, and doctors, at least here, overprescribe, because, well, first of all, they know they're going to get paid by the government or the insurance company, and they're also practicing defensive medicine. But even if 25% of those are legit serious infections, we could be losing hundreds of thousands of people a year to dog bites, unless people start to take dog bites seriously. right? In other words, we get to, okay, we're going to go to, so that's one of our favorite terms on the Discord is like, okay, you got a dog running around biting people. We're going to, put Rule 308 into effect. Okay. No more, problem solved.
Yeah, yeah.
And because you have to, because you can't just say, well, if he bites somebody, we'll just take him to the doctor. No, he bites somebody and that person dies.
Yeah.
How much of that are we willing? Right now, we only lose whatever 100 people a year, at least on paper. It's probably a lot more than that. But are we willing to lose, 5,000 times that? I don't think so.
Yeah. I
don't think so. So, so things like food, medicine, other resources become scarce. That could just collapse this whole thing. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to be the solution. I really don't. But if that happens, that's going to be. So, and dog people got to think about that too. They got to think really hard about, they got to, consider their decisions very carefully.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually never thought about that. Yeah. But like you could of course make the joke that the real dog owners, like the ones that are really that are really obsessed about it, they would probably starve for their dog. They would rather give their food to the dog than eat it. Eat it themselves.
A lot of times, you have problems. Remember, like IHD, one of his best videos was when he it was a thing when he was a kid, and I guess he was at his grandparents, and the dog basically ate his dinner.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah, that was we had a situation. Actually, it's funny because I had a situation like that when I was a teenager, and actually my parents had divorced and remarried, and so it was like hamburger night. My stepdad was cooking hamburgers, and outside on the grill. And he looked away for a minute, and he had both dogs outside with him. And the lab ate all 4 hamburgers right off the grill. Boom, gone, right? And it wasn't a big deal because it's like, we weren't poor. I mean, so it's like, I don't remember what the outcome was. I guess we had scrambled eggs for dinner. But imagine if that was the only thing to eat.
Yeah, that's true.
Imagine that, because that's a way most people lived until 1900, because everybody, not everybody, but most people take their prosperity for granted. And it's not something to take for granted. It's a very precious and very fragile thing.
Yeah. Actually, I just thought, like the situation that you described, with the hamburgers, like if that happened, 50 years ago here in Hungary, then people would have taken the dog and they would have shot it.
Oh yeah,
like absolutely.
The dog would have been dinner, right?
That would have been dinner. I mean, that would have been toast immediately. Yeah. But because people back then, I mean, they would have. They would never have been able to afford to lose food. Yeah. And that mutt would have been gone within 2 minutes, shotgun and toast. But but today, no.
Yeah, no problem. And you talk about like, dogs destroying property, eating food, destroying property, things. Dogs say, well, I bought a $200 pair of shoes and the dog ate the shoes.
Yeah.
But imagine, most people, they take it, well, I got others. Imagine if that was your only pair of shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Now imagine you can't even get another pair of shoes because the supply chains have collapsed.
Yeah.
Are we going to let dogs do that then?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Because then it's not funny. It's because they treat this stuff like it's cute or funny. And even the thing with the hamburger stuff, I don't remember being mad. I just kind of put because the dogs. Those dogs they weren't dangerous, and they weren't even really like a problem most of the time, but they were just stupid and useless to the point of hilarity, right? Yeah. Like they were just so impossibly dumb, and he was constantly yelling at them too. You know,
Yeah.
I went through that in another video also, just like how, you know, just impossibly dumb they were.
Yeah.
So what about you?
Yeah.
Like well, I mean, did your family have pets growing up, or what were your experiences?
Well, I mean, actually, we did have a dog. That's pretty funny. But I mean, I don't remember that dog. I mean, it was when we were, you know, I was like 1 or 2 years old. And
Yeah,
apparently we did have a dog when we were still in Hungary. But, you know, that was, you know, back then the dogs were not, they were not let inside. You know, a dog was really like the dog had a job and like nobody would let them come into the house. I mean, they would be outside and you know nobody would consider them you know as a pet or something that you would sleep with in your bed. Like that was absolutely out of question. But I don't remember that dog. I mean that was so long ago. But I mean I did have a lot of pets actually. I mean but you know like small pets like the usual stuff, you know, hamsters and guinea pigs and all sorts of stuff. And later, when I was older, actually, I had very exotic pets. Like, I mean, I was really into scorpions for
oh
quite a
wow,
while,
okay,
and I actually went to Northern Africa to actually collect scorpions
oh
in
wow,
the desert. So that was the type of pet that I was into, and you know. I made a joke in one of my last videos about that we should actually declare the scorpion to be man's best friend
yeah, why
because
not?
they kill far less people than dogs do.
Yeah,
So there's loads of statistics about that, and scorpions only kill a fraction of the people that dogs do worldwide.
yeah,
So why is that not man's best friend actually? And they don't bark, so
yeah. They don't bark,
it's
they don't noise pollute.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't, as long as you don't bring your scorpion to restaurants and grocery stores, like, you know, I'm cool
Yeah.
with it. I mean, there's some animals. I mean, I'm maybe not the biggest cat person, but I have a cat,
Oh,
and
really?
I've had cats, and we had all kinds of animals. Grows. We had the dogs, and my mom was a horse person, so we had a couple of
Oh,
horses, and you know, we had a few. So we usually had, you know, 1 to 3 cats, I guess, and we had some other pets. Like my brother had guinea pigs for a while,
okay.
but you know, yeah, you know, I like, you know, having cats around. And so, you know, even going back to my blogging days, people call me a hypocrite, but it's like, well, yeah, but cats they're not a nuisance. So even if you don't like them, like, yeah, I would not have a scorpion as a pet, but you know, if you can keep it without it causing anyone else a problem, you know, without
Yeah.
violating anyone's rights,
Yeah.
I've got nothing against it, you know. And actually here they're part of the natural environment. Although actually this part of Florida, we don't get too many, but down south,
Mm-hmm.
um, because my grandparents were in South Florida. I remember if you ever left your shoes outside, you always had to
Ah,
shake
yeah,
them
that's a
out. You had to
classic. Yeah.
shake them out because you never knew, like there might be a scorpion or something, or a
Yeah.
spider or something you didn't want in them. You
Yeah. Well, I'd be
know?
delighted. Yeah.
Yeah. They got lots of iguanas down there too. Although I think
Oh,
those are feral. Probably those are feral pets, but
yeah.
yeah.
I heard they're an invasive species. I mean, they're not. Are they
I
native
don't
to
think they're
Florida or?
natural because, you know, when I go down there now, like the Florida Keys area, they're like everywhere, and they're not a problem. They don't noise pollute. They don't aggress towards people. They don't. I'm like, oh, there's an iguana, like whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I don't remember seeing them as a kid. South Florida does have a big problem with, you know, pythons. Get
Yeah,
that
I heard
they
that.
have,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're like feral because they were pet snakes that either escaped,
Yeah.
or people
Yeah.
turned loose, and so that's a sort of another animal uncontrolled problem. What's interesting though is how, again, that problem is managed completely differently than the stray dog problem,
Oh,
because
of course.
in
Yeah.
fact those pythons, I believe it's pythons, I forget, it's whatever it was some popular pet snake.
Mm-hmm.
Got into the Everglades, and again, they're invasive and they multiplied, and they're kind of wreaking havoc with the natural environment. So the Park Service, the United States government at one point, well, first of all, they legalized, they're like, you can kill as many as you want. Like if you have them on your property,
Mm-hmm.
kill any means, whatever, just kill them all if you want, no problem. But not only did they legalize culling, they were actually giving bounties on them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
At one point, they had two contests. The Park Service did. They had one cash prize for who killed the most snakes.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
And another one for who killed the biggest snake.
Yeah.
Imagine. So I was thinking, is like, okay, yeah, there's like problems with other like feral animals or whatever.
Yeah,
but it's interesting how it's the dogs are handled completely differently. Right. So like with the snakes, it's like, imagine that saying like, yeah, here's how we're going to solve our feral dog problem. Because you've vlogged about that. It's like, okay, we're going to have two cash prizes, one for who kills the most mutts and another one for who kills the biggest mutt. Imagine if that happened.
Yeah, that would be in international news.
That would blow everybody's mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
No.
Although I would volunteer for that actually. Absolutely.
Yeah, I particularly if the money's good, They kind of the same thing because and I vlogged and blogged about because my title is Animal Uncontrol. I hate dogs or kill all mutts or whatever. Look, 99.9% of the problems with domestic animals are dog related.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. It's painfully obvious. We got problems with feral hogs also.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, those animals are actually maybe even worse than dogs. But again, the way that's addressed, in society and by authorities is completely different.
Yeah.
Because they've, the state, and many states have done this, but they've, that's open season on them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can shoot. Well, it depends. There's some restrictions, but at least if you're on private property, whether you're the owner or if you have permission, you can shoot all the hogs you want. There's no bag limit. There's no bag limit. There's no weapons restrictions. Because often with hunting seasons, like for typical game animals, like say deer, they have seasons and there's bag limits and there's weapons restrictions too. Like you'll have center fire rifle and bow season and muzzle loader and stuff like that. But with the hogs, it doesn't matter. If you have a belt-fed machine gun and it's owned legally, you can use that to hunt hogs with. Like, I don't know anybody. I think they might do that in Texas, but you can shoot on private property. You can shoot all the hogs you want. Now, on public property, it's limited to hunting season, but there's no bag limit. You can shoot them until your gun barrel melts, right? Right, but so again, so the problem is, and that's why it's different because at least if you have a hog problem, you've at least got the self-help tools to deal with it. But if you have a dog problem, you don't because they're protected.
Absolutely.
And that's a very important distinction. So. Anyway. Well.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, my friend, my voice is starting to go, and I don't know if it's late where you are or really early, but I think I'm going to wrap it up because I do intend to post this to my YouTube channel.
Oh, cool.
I don't know because I have other voice chats posted. They're pretty informative if you want to listen to them. But
sure.
So I post, and if you want to download it and repost it to yours, you may, or some portion of it if you want. I'm not doing this for money, so if that work, you can do that if you want. But
no. I thought you were talking about the money. No, I'm not doing it for money either.
I don't make any money off of this. So, I'm saying this is really, I'm not claiming any intellectual capital. So if you want to, download it
thank
or
you.
put up, if you want to repost it or some portion of it, go ahead. There's no objection. Just
Okay, thanks a lot.
if you
Thanks a
want
lot.
to.
I think I'll just send people to your channel then.
All right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
I mean,
yeah,
I really like these conversations. This is much more interesting than just a bunch of people doing monologues. So
yeah. I also do a lot of monologues. I thought I should perhaps change that a little bit, but I blather a lot. But
it's like
for the
I
moment,
I think I take the prize for that one. You want to know what's scary? You know, want to know what's really scary is that in my family, I'm the quiet one.
All right. Well,
think about
I don't
that.
want to imagine a Christmas party in your family. Then.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They would get really interesting.
Yeah, all
So.
Right.
Anyway, friend, thanks for joining. This is really interesting. We should do this again, and maybe some other time. We'll probably should do the 10 Commandments, and I do these every week or so. So maybe somebody else will get on. We'll get on with Kidder or Chef or Dark Castle or Serena, so we can have like a 3 or 4 way conversation. So
excellent.
That'll make it interesting. So anyway,
splendid.
Yeah, so I'm going to wrap it up. So. All right, folks, this is Animal Uncontrol. And as always, ding, 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 people first.